Hey everyone, I'm Kirk and I'm going to tell you about this week's cocktails. So I have two fall cocktails for you. They're both classics, but with a twist on them. I'm making them either in a style that I like, preferable to the classic, or it's just kind of a newer way. So I'll start with the shake and drink this week. Unfortunately, I messed up my first take. So the drink is already made, so I'm going to tell you about what that drink is. So the first drink, the shake and drink, is the Lion's Tail. So it's a classic cocktail that typically calls for bourbon, lemon, maple syrup, allspice liqueur, and Angostura bitters. So a whole lot of fall flavors in there. And it's just such a lovely shake and drink that I wanted to make it for you all. My variation on it is that I prefer lime in my Lion's Tail to lemon juice. I find for some reason, usually it's counterintuitive to go lime with maple syrup. Most people stick with lemon and maple syrup. They are complementary flavors. But I find that lime works a little bit better for me, so that's what the cocktail will be. So I'm starting with Old Forester bourbon. This is bottled in bond, so it's bottled at 100 proof. As opposed to 80 proof is kind of the typical home bourbon and the minimum for it to be called a bourbon. But I find that Old Forester has a lot of banana esters, banana notes to it. And so I like using this one with Allspice Dram because I find that it lightens it up. Allspice Dram can be a really heavy hitter in a cocktail. A little bit goes a really long way. So there's only a quarter ounce of this in there, but I thought that I would at least balance it out with a different whiskey. I also wanted the proof, it to be 100 proof in there for it to be a little bit stronger as the nights get darker. So, Old Forester, Allspice Dram, there's some grade A maple syrup, 2 dashes of Angostura bitters. The jars will look very similar in color this week. So the jar with more liquid in it, that is your Lion's Tail. So that's your shake and drink. As usual, you'll add half of it to a cocktail shaker, shake it up over ice, and then strain it into an up glass. So one of the things, I know I was beating this drum last week about the importance of shaking your shake and drinks and not just pouring it over ice. And the reason for that is, as I said a couple weeks ago, is that you're not only aiming to dilute your drink, you're also aiming to aerate your drink. And with maple syrup especially, actually, maple syrup holds a foam or holds a head on the drink. So you can kind of see just there the contrast between the foamy, frothy surface of the drink and the rest of the drink in there. And that's, I suppose, because maple syrup is a little bit thicker, and so it holds the aeration a little bit better. Pineapple drinks are actually notorious for this as well. A lot of the proteins in pineapple will hold a foam. Chickpea foam, egg whites, those are other examples of things, or chickpea liquid, excuse me, that will hold a foam and almost make like a very, very, very basic or weak meringue. And so with this drink, you definitely do want to shake it up. If you're going to pour it over ice, that's perfectly fine. Then I'd recommend doing what's called a dry shake. So that is, you just take your cocktails in the jar, and before you serve them, give them a good shake for a solid 30 seconds, 45 seconds before you pour it over ice. And you'll just be able to tell like that the drink lightens up in color. It develops a head on it that you can see pretty clearly there. And then go ahead and pour it over ice. But I prefer just to go ahead and shake it up over ice and then pour it up if you want. So there's no garnish on this one unless you have a bottle of Angostura bitters at home, and then I'd say put a dash on the surface of the drink. If you don't have a bottle of bitters at home, don't worry about this, don't stress. There's already 2 dashes in the drink. I only add it there because it makes a nice color contrast with that foam that I was talking about from the maple syrup. It just didn't seem practical this week to bag up, 40 different Ziploc bags, each with 1 dash of Angostura bitters just to put on the surface of the drink. So that's the Lion's Tail. The second cocktail is one of my all-time favorite classic cocktails that almost no one makes, or I think I've seen it on a single cocktail menu in Atlanta, and maybe even a single cocktail menu anywhere I look. And it's called a Japanese cocktail. And so the name came about, it was first published in the Jerry Thomas cocktail book. Jerry Thomas is considered to be pretty much the United States' first bartender. And seeing that the United States is the cocktail innovator for the whole world, during Prohibition, we exported a whole bunch of bartenders to the rest of the world who are looking for employment. Pretty much he's considered the father of, or grandfather of the American cocktail. And he published a book. It's been republished a lot since then. It's often hard to use those recipes because they either have varying measurements. You know, they'll call something a wine glass. There's a unit of measurement called a hooker, not making that up. It was actually in the classic Nevada cocktail, which I thought was very funny. You know, so a lot of those drinks need adaptation for modern palates because we tend to like things more tart and more bitter than they did 150 years ago. So this cocktail was supposed to have originated when the first Japanese delegation to the United States met in New York. But, you know, there's kind of, it's a little bit folklore. We're not 100% sure if that's the origination of the drink. Otherwise, it has no other Japanese ingredients in it. It's actually kind of in the old-fashioned family. So because it's an old-fashioned family, you'll find 3 ingredients. So base spirit, sweetener, and bitters. So in this case, the base spirit isn't whiskey, it's cognac. And so I'm using Camus, very special VS cognac. Typically at home, I'll either use this one or I'll use Pierre Ferrand 1840. However, the Pierre Ferrand is close to about a $50 bottle. So if I'm looking for something to mix with cocktails, I typically go with something that's about half the price with the Camus cognac. But it's right, kind of a nice middle ground. It's not going to have some of the harsh notes that maybe a younger cognac will have. And it also won't have a lot of the wood influence that something that has a VSOP designation or an XO designation, which indicates aging. So that's your base spirit. The sweetener in this one, of the original Japanese cocktail, it called for an ingredient called orgeat, which is an almond syrup with a little bit of orange flower water mixed into there. I have always kind of tweaked with this recipe. So I've tried to make a southern version of a Japanese cocktail with rye and a pecan orgeat. I've tried, you know, all sorts of different things. And I saw some macadamia nuts that I really wanted to make a macadamia nut orgeat with. So that is the kind of nut syrup that's in this one. And then there's 2 dashes of Angostura bitters. If you have a nut allergy, please let me know because I can do a different cocktail for you. But just know that there is cross-contamination in my kitchen. You know, I can't guarantee that there wasn't any. I try and wash my tools in between each use, but I don't want anyone to get really sick off of these cocktails. So with this one, you'll want to stir it. So you'll pour half of the jar. This is just one drink in here. You'll pour half the jar into a mixing glass to stir it up. With this one, I would recommend, even if you just serve it over ice, which is fine, I would recommend giving it a light stir on that ice before you serve it. And the reason for that is that nut syrup is a little bit thick and it can skew a little bit sweet if you haven't diluted it. So I would say give it a light stir, even if you're serving it over ice. And then the other thing that I would recommend is possibly having it as a after dinner drink as well, since it skews a little bit sweeter. So your garnish bag this week, there will be 3 lemon coins in there. When you add it to your mixing glass, you'll want to take 2 of those lemon coins and peel side out and express the oils into the mixing glass. And that's because we want all of those lemon oils to kind of thoroughly mix in with the drink. Again, it just kind of balances some of that sweetness that's in there because it is a touch on the sweeter side of drinks that I typically make. So we'll go ahead and strain this into, I use a little dessert glass, but if you want to use a coupe, that's fine. If you want to use, put it down in a rocks glass, that's fine as well. This is just a little bit full for my dessert glass. And then you'll take that final lemon coin and then express it over the surface. So I think I misspoke and said there'll be 3 coins in there. There'll be 6 in there, 2 per drink, and then 2 for the surface of the drink. And that is the Japanese cocktail with a macadamia nut orgeat. Gosh, this is full. Anyway, thanks so much.